Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the body-wide domino effect triggered by chronic kidney disease. We're going to approach the failing kidney not just as some isolated organ having a bad day, but really as the epicenter of a massive metabolic earthquake. You know, when the kidneys begin to shut down, those shock waves, they're felt absolutely everywhere. And understanding exactly how to survive those systemic complications is what we are unpacking today. Let's get into it.
Here is our roadmap for today. First, the general complications of CKD. Second, managing anemia. Third, we'll tackle secondary hyperparathyroidism. Fourth, cardiovascular risks. And finally, managing hypertension.
Starting off with Section 1, complications of CKD and that systemic domino effect.
So when the kidneys fail to filter, the consequences rapidly spill over into pretty much every other physiological system. It's wild. As nitrogenous waste and all those metabolites accumulate in the blood, patients face this massive cascade of issues. We're talking about everything from severe fatigue and peripheral neuropathy to bone pain, GI bleeding, and even heart failure. It's a profound whole-body failure. And when you grasp the sheer scope of this web of symptoms, you really start to see why managing CKD requires a deeply holistic approach.
Moving to Section 2, managing anemia in CKD, or what happens when the bone marrow starves.
Okay, so let's dive into the first major complication, a profound drop in red blood cells. The primary culprit here is the kidney's failure to produce a vital hormone called erythropoietin, or EPO. Normally, the kidneys act as your body's oxygen sensors, right? They release EPO to tell the bone marrow to crank out more red blood cells. But in CKD, that vital signal is just lost. Actually, scratch that. It's not just an EPO problem. This is a multi-front assault. It's compounded by uremic toxins directly suppressing the marrow, severe iron deficiency from terrible gut absorption, and chronic blood loss, especially for patients undergoing hemodialysis.
The solution? Well, it involves replacing exactly what's been lost. We use erythropoiesis-stimulating agents, ESAs, like recombinant EPO, to artificially provide that missing signal to the marrow. We also have to make sure iron stores are adequate, which frequently means relying on intravenous iron, because frankly, oral absorption is so poor in these patients. And recently, science has given us a really exciting new tool, HIF inhibitors, or prolyl hydroxylase inhibitors. These medications actually trick the body by mimicking a hypoxia response, which stimulates the body's own remaining EPO production and improves iron absorption all at the same time. It's a real game changer.
Now, here's an absolutely crucial point, our target. We deliberately aim for a hemoglobin level of 10 to 12 grams per deciliter. You might be wondering, why not just aim for a totally normal level, like 14 or 15? Well, studies have consistently shown that pushing hemoglobin higher than 13 in CKD patients is actually associated with increased cardiovascular mortality and stroke risk. So we are treating the anemia to improve fatigue and quality of life, for sure, but we have to respect the physiological limits of a body that's under chronic stress.
All right, Section 3, secondary hyperparathyroidism and bones. Let's talk about the mineral earthquake.
So we move from the blood to the skeleton, where this complex endocrine feedback loop just goes completely awry. It starts when the glomerular filtration rate, or GFR, drops. The failing kidney can't clear dietary phosphate, so phosphate gets retained in the blood. In a desperate attempt to clear it, the bones release a hormone called FGF23. Meanwhile, the damaged kidneys are failing to convert vitamin D into its active form, and without active vitamin D, the gut stops absorbing calcium, causing blood calcium levels to just plummet. Predictably, the parathyroid glands panic at this low calcium and high phosphate, and they go into absolute overdrive, spiking the release of parathyroid hormone, or PTH.
What's really fascinating and terrifying about this desperate negative feedback loop is that it acts like a chemical wrecking ball. Because the gut isn't absorbing calcium, all that excess PTH forces the body to pull calcium directly out of its own bones just to keep blood levels stable. Think about that for a second. The body is literally dissolving its own skeleton to try and correct a calcium-phosphate imbalance.
This prolonged PTH excess and abnormal mineralization leads to a whole spectrum of bone diseases collectively called renal osteodystrophy. We see increased osteoclastic activity leading to osteitis fibrosis cystica, and sometimes this paradoxical hardening of the bone called osteosclerosis. It creates a stunning visual marker in the vertebrae. Radiologists actually call it the classic rugger jersey spine because of the alternating dense white sclerotic bands and darker parodic bands. It is literally a visual representation of a profound metabolic failure.
To manage this, we can't just sit back. We have to aggressively intervene at multiple points in the cycle. First, we stop phosphate at the source by prescribing phosphate binders, things like Sevelamer or lanthanum, that patients take with their meals to trap phosphate right there in the gut. Next, we replace the missing active vitamin D using analogs like calcitriol to directly suppress the parathyroid glands. And finally, we use calcimimetics like INI-CET. These are incredibly cool drugs that bind to the parathyroid gland, tricking it into thinking blood calcium is already high, which shuts down that rogue PTH secretion.
That brings us to Section 4, cardiovascular disease risk factors, which happens to be the leading cause of mortality.
So all of these metabolic derangements point toward a really critical question. What is the actual leading cause of mortality in patients with chronic kidney disease? You might naturally assume it's the total loss of renal function resulting in fatal uremia, but the reality? It's far more systemic and much more immediate.
The data paints a really stark picture here. Patients with CKD are overwhelmingly more likely to die from cardiovascular disease than they are to ever even reach end-stage renal disease and require dialysis. So your kidneys might be the things failing, but it is actually your heart that is in the most immediate danger.
And this massive mortality spike occurs because these patients are facing a devastating double threat:
First, they carry a heavy burden of everyday traditional cardiovascular risks: hypertension, diabetes, high cholesterol, the usual suspects. But on top of that, they suffer from non-traditional CKD-specific dangers. Remember that high phosphate and calcium we just talked about dissolving from the bones? Well, it doesn't just happily float around in the blood. It precipitates and directly calcifies the blood vessels and heart valves. Add in the chronic strain from anemia and systemic inflammation, and you have a literal perfect storm for accelerated heart failure and sudden cardiac death.
Section 5. Managing hypertension and CKD. It's all about protecting the pump and the filter. Because hypertension is both a leading cause and a devastating consequence of CKD, controlling it is absolutely paramount. High systemic blood pressure is incredibly destructive to the kidney's microanatomy. All that high pressure in the body translates directly to increased intraglomerular pressure, the pressure inside the tiny, delicate filtering units of the kidney. This high pressure mechanically stretches and damaging the surviving nephrons. The inflamed high-pressure glomerulus then begins leaking protein, which further scars the tissue, rapidly accelerating the irreversible decline in kidney function.
To slow this renal progression down, we rely on a very clear set of strategies. We severely restrict dietary salt to keep fluid volume down. We aggressively utilize diuretics to flush out the volume overload that those failing kidneys just can't clear anymore. But most importantly, we deploy ACE inhibitors or ARBs. These specific blood pressure medications dilate the blood vessels exiting the kidney filter, which effectively drops the pressure inside the filter itself. They are profoundly protective, especially if protein is already leaking into the urine.
However, here is the big takeaway. We must not oversuppress. A perfectly healthy kidney can auto-regulate, meaning if your blood pressure drops, the kidney automatically adjusts its vessels to ensure it still gets enough blood flow. But failing kidneys lose this vital ability to auto-regulate. This means if we drop the patient's blood pressure too low with our medications, we can accidentally starve the surviving kidney tissue of blood, causing a brand new acute injury right on top of their chronic disease.
Ultimately, managing chronic kidney disease isn't just about fixing the kidney. It is a delicate, systemic tightrope walk. Think about it. We have to treat the anemia without thickening the blood too much. We have to bind phosphate without calcifying the heart. And we must lower blood pressure to save the heart while ensuring the failing kidney still receives enough blood to survive. It forces us to ask, how do we heal the whole patient without accidentally pushing one of the dominoes over ourselves? It's a fascinating, complex challenge. Hopefully this explainer gave you a really clear view of exactly how medical science attempts to strike that perfect balance. Keep learning, and we'll catch you in the next explainer.